I took the job because I needed to get away. City life had worn me down, sirens wailing, people shouting, the endless weight of civilization pressing against my skull. So when the Park Service offered me a position as a ranger in the Ozarks, I jumped at the chance. The job paid decently, came with free lodging, and best of all, it promised isolation. Just me, the trees, and the open sky. The station was an old wooden outpost, nestled deep within Mark Twain National Forest, miles away from the nearest town. It looked straight out of the last century, faded logs, a sagging porch, and windows that had seen more seasons than I cared to count. A single lamp flickered outside, throwing weak light onto the damp earth. The only other building in sight was a rusty tool shed, its tin roof glinting under the pale moon. I parked my truck and stepped out, my boots sinking slightly into the mud. The air smelled rich, earthy, damp, and filled with the sharp tang of pine. It was refreshing, even if the silence was a little too heavy. As I reached for my duffel bag, the door to the station creaked open. A figure stepped onto the porch, a tall man with grizzled hair and a thick beard. His uniform was old, his badge worn dull from years of use. "Name's Carter," he said, voice rough as gravel. "You the new guy?" I nodded. "Yeah, James Holloway." Carter grunted. "Come inside, we need to talk." The interior was no better than the exterior, dimly lit, with walls lined by shelves stacked with maps, radios, and dusty binders. A single wooden desk sat in the middle of the room, covered in scattered paperwork. A coffee pot rested on a hot plate, the scent of burnt caffeine clinging to the air. "First things first," Carter said, dropping into the chair behind the desk. "This ain't like any other park job you've had before." I raised an eyebrow. "I figured it wouldn't be a vacation." Carter chuckled dryly. "That's putting it lightly." He pulled a worn notebook from a drawer and slid it across the desk. "We got rules out here, Holloway. Strange ones. You follow them, you'll be fine. Ignore them, you won't last a week." I picked up the notebook. The cover was scuffed, the pages dog-eared. Scribbled in uneven handwriting were the words, "Park Ranger Protocols, read and obey." I glanced at Carter, half expecting him to be joking. He wasn't. His face was dead serious. "Go on," he said. "Take a look." I flipped to the first page, and my stomach knotted. Rules for survival. 1. Never enter the woods after sunset, no matter what you hear. 2. If you hear a woman calling for help, do not answer. It is not a woman. 3. Patrol the fire tower every night at 2:13 a.m. If the light is off, turn it on immediately. Do not look outside the window while doing so. 4. If you find a deer standing completely still, staring at you, walk away. Do not break eye contact until you are inside. 5. There is a man with no eyes. If you see him, pretend you don't. He will leave you alone unless you acknowledge him. 6. Never take the same path twice in one night. The forest doesn't like patterns. 7. If you hear footsteps behind you, do not turn around. Keep walking until you reach the station. Lock the door. 8. There is a phone in the station. It will ring sometimes, but no one is on the other end. Do not answer it. 9. You will see people in the forest at night. They are not people. 10. If something calls your name from the trees, no, it didn't. I let out a slow breath and looked up at Carter. "You serious?" "Dead serious." I laughed, but it came out forced. "Come on, this some initiation thing? Try to scare the rookie?" Carter leaned forward, eyes cold. "Listen to me, Holloway. I've been out here for 15 years. I've seen good men disappear because they didn't listen. These aren't ghost stories. These are the rules that keep you breathing." I swallowed. Carter stood and grabbed his hat. "Come on, I'll show you around before it gets dark." The tour was brief. The station was basic, small kitchen, a bunk room, a radio room. Outside, the tool shed held spare fuel, shovels, and a first aid kit. A narrow dirt path led toward the fire tower, its skeletal frame rising above the treetops in the distance. "You'll be making rounds every night," Carter said as we walked. "Check the campsites, make sure hikers aren't getting lost, but most of your job is just keeping an eye on things." I nodded. "And if I see something weird?" "You follow the rules," Carter said simply. I wasn't sure if I believed him, but the way he said it made my skin crawl. We walked in silence for a bit. The sun was beginning to dip behind the hills, shadows stretching long and thin across the ground. That's when I saw it. A deer. It stood at the edge of the tree line, motionless, its eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. Carter stopped walking. "Don't move," he muttered. I didn't. The deer didn't move either. Its body was eerily stiff, its chest rising and falling in slow, measured breaths. "What do we do?" I whispered. Carter's jaw tightened. "We back away. Slowly, and don't take your eyes off it." I swallowed hard and took a step back. The deer remained still, watching. Another step, then another. Finally, we reached the station porch. Carter pushed me inside, slamming the door shut behind us. I turned to him, heart pounding. "What the hell was that?" Carter exhaled sharply. "Your first warning." I peered out the window. The deer was gone. The forest silent, but something told me it was still watching, waiting, and night was coming fast. The first night in the Ozarks is something you can never truly prepare for. Even if you know the rules, even if you've been warned, something about the isolation makes every sound sharper, every shadow longer, every breath harder to take. That first night, as I sat alone in the station, listening to the wind rustling through the trees, I had no idea how much the forest had already begun to change me. Carter had left after the brief tour, his words echoing in my mind. "Follow the rules, Holloway. They'll keep you alive." He'd left with a warning, a parting shot as he shut the door behind him. "Don't stay up too late. The woods don't like it when you're awake when they're sleeping." That had me uneasy, but I shrugged it off. Maybe he was just an old man trying to spook the new guy. The station grew darker as the last traces of sunlight faded away. I lit the lamp on the desk, the soft glow casting long shadows on the walls. I sat down in the rickety chair trying to read through some old reports, but my mind kept drifting. Every creak of the floorboards seemed like something just outside. Every rustle of the trees felt like it was meant for my ears alone. It was then that the phone rang. I stared at it, half expecting it to be a prank, the ringing a cruel joke to test my nerves. The old black rotary phone was the only one in the station, a relic from a time long past. I had been told not to answer it, so I didn't. I just let it ring. The sound grew louder, more insistent, as if the phone was calling me by name, begging for my attention. It rang for what felt like an eternity, each ring dragging me deeper into a trance, my muscles tensing with every chime. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:43 p.m. It had been ringing for over 5 minutes. A constant reminder of something I couldn't explain. Just when I thought it might stop, there was a sudden silence, a deep, unsettling quiet that pressed against my ears. I almost expected the phone to ring again, but it didn't. The air was thick, heavy, like the forest itself had been holding its breath. Then I heard something else. A whisper. It was faint, so soft that at first I thought it was the wind. But then it came again, this time clearer. "Help me." I froze. My heart skipped a beat. It sounded like a woman's voice, just outside the door. But no one was supposed to be out here. This was the middle of nowhere. I stood up slowly, as if any sudden movement might shatter the silence and reveal whatever was lurking outside. I reached for the door handle, my fingers trembling. The woman's voice came again, this time more desperate. "Please, help me. I'm lost." My breath caught in my throat. The rules flooded back into my mind, and I remembered Carter's warning. If you hear a woman calling for help, do not answer. It is not a woman. But I couldn't stop myself. Something about the voice, the desperation in it, pulled at me. I stepped toward the door, my hand shaking as I reached for the knob. I told myself it was just another lost hiker, just another person in need of assistance. I twisted the knob and opened the door. The cold night air hit me like a slap in the face, but there was no woman standing there, no one at all. The woods stretched out before me, a dark sea of trees and shadows, silent and unmoving. I stepped outside, my eyes scanning the darkness. Nothing. The wind whispered through the branches, but it wasn't the voice I'd heard. "Help me." The voice came again, but this time it was further away, somewhere deep within the trees. My blood ran cold. I should have gone back inside. I should have slammed the door and locked it tight. But instead, I took a step forward, drawn by that voice. I called out into the night, hoping to hear an answer. "Who's out there? Are you okay?" Nothing. Just the wind and the rustling of leaves. A chill crawled up my spine. I had heard it clearly, though. The voice was no longer a call for help. It was a command. Come closer. It was then that I realized I was no longer alone. I turned around, and there, just at the edge of the porch, was a figure. A woman. She stood motionless, her back to me. Her long, dark hair fell like a curtain down her back, but there was something wrong about her stance. Too still. Too unnatural. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words caught in my throat. The woman turned slowly, her head jerking toward me in a way that didn't seem possible. Her eyes were hollow, dark pits, empty, lifeless. I couldn't breathe. Her lips twisted into a smile, too wide, too knowing, and she whispered again, just loud enough for me to hear. Come with me. I felt the weight of her gaze on me, cold as ice, and suddenly the forest didn't feel like a sanctuary anymore. It felt like a trap. I took a step back, and the woman took a step forward. Don't come any closer, I stammered, my hand reaching for the door. But she was faster. Before I could turn, she was right there, standing inches from me. Her smile widened, the hollow pits of her eyes drawing me in, and I could feel the air thickening, pressing down on my chest. I slapped my hand against the door frame, fumbling for the handle, but the door was already locked. There was no escape. And then, just as suddenly as she appeared, the woman was gone. I stood there, gasping, my heart pounding in my ears. The night had grown eerily quiet again. The wind had stopped, the trees were still, and in the distance, the faint sound of a laugh echoed through the woods. I slammed the door shut, my hands shaking uncontrollably. I didn't know what had just happened. Was it real? Or was I losing my mind already? I locked every bolt, checked the windows, and took a seat on the floor, my back pressed against the door. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, watching, waiting. The phone rang again. I didn't answer it. I couldn't. The rules flashed in my mind again, but there was one that stuck with me. If something calls your name from the trees, no, it didn't, but this wasn't just a voice in the trees. This was something else, something far worse. I sat in the darkness, the silence surrounding me like a tomb. The wind had picked up again, but it felt like a warning. I could hear the rustling of leaves, but there was something underneath it, something just out of reach. The world outside the station had shifted. I wasn't sure when it happened, but the woods had stopped feeling like a place of nature. They felt like a place of hunger. I didn't know how long I sat there, waiting for the night to pass. The only sound was the quiet hum of the lamp. It felt like hours, but it could have been mere minutes. The clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, marking the passage of time, but every minute stretched on forever. Then, around midnight, I heard it, a soft, hollow knock at the door. The knock was quiet, barely audible at first, like the tapping of a twig against the door. But as I listened, it grew louder, more deliberate, until it seemed to echo through the entire station. My heart lurched into my throat. I froze, every muscle in my body tensing, every instinct screaming at me to stay still, to remain hidden, to not make a sound. But it was too late. I had already heard it. The knock came again, this time louder, sharper, a rhythm like the ticking of a clock. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't an animal, and it wasn't a trick of my mind. Someone, or something, was at the door. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 12:02 a.m. A chill ran down my spine. Carter had warned me about the woods, about the strange things that dwelled in them, but this felt different. This felt personal. The knock came again, this time more insistent. 3 quick raps, followed by a pause. It was as though whatever was on the other side knew exactly when to strike, when to press just hard enough to make sure I was listening. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't heard, but my feet wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, my breath shallow, my palms slick with sweat. I forced myself to stand, my legs unsteady, and approached the door slowly, as though the very act of walking would wake whatever was lurking outside. Every step seemed to reverberate through the room, too loud, too heavy. When I reached the door, I stopped. My hand hovered over the latch, but I didn't dare touch it. There was no reason to open the door. I had heard the stories, the warnings. I knew the rules. Never answer the door at night. The knock came again, this time with a voice that sent a shiver straight through me. James, it said, soft and slow, but unmistakable. My name. I felt my breath catch in my chest. No one knew I was here. No one should have known. I stepped back, my mind racing. Was it a trick? Was it Carter messing with me? Was someone trying to lure me out into the woods? The forest had a way of playing on your fears, making you question your senses. But this was different. James, please, the voice whispered again, louder now, its tone desperate. I took a deep breath, my fingers trembling as they brushed against the doorframe. My body was telling me to run, to flee, but my feet remained stuck to the floor. It was as if the very air in the room had become thick, suffocating, pressing me down into the ground. The knock came once more, a series of slow, deliberate raps. The voice followed just as it had before, but now there was something else, a low guttural sound, almost like a growl, rising from the forest. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. The air grew still, too still. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, each beat echoing in the silence. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, unable to move, unable to think. And then, just as I thought I might suffocate in that stifling stillness, I heard something else, a scraping sound, like claws against wood. It wasn't coming from the door, it was coming from the window. I whirled around, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I could see nothing, but I could feel it. The weight of something heavy, something dark, just beyond the glass. The lamp flickered once, casting long shadows across the walls, but the room remained eerily silent. I stepped closer to the window, my pulse pounding in my ears, my hands shaking as I pulled back the curtain. Nothing. No creature. No shape. Nothing but the black void of the forest stretching out into the distance. But then, in the corner of my vision, I saw it, a movement. A flash of white, something pale and swift, disappearing into the trees. I blinked, my mind struggling to make sense of what I had seen. My eyes couldn't have been playing tricks on me. I had seen something. Something. Human? Or at least shaped like one. A cold, sharp fear gripped my heart. I had to get out of here. The rules were clear: never stay out after dark, never stay alone. And yet, I was breaking them all. Carter's warning echoed in my mind, louder now than before. The forest doesn't like it when you're awake, when they're sleeping. I turned to look back at the door. It was still locked, but the weight of the situation pressed on me now. I had to leave. I had to get out before whatever it was found a way in. I grabbed my jacket, my flashlight, and my keys, the sudden impulse to flee overwhelming every rational thought. I couldn't stay in this station a moment longer. I had to get to the fire tower. Carter had mentioned it earlier. It was the highest point in the area, a place where you could see everything. Maybe from there I'd get a better view of whatever was lurking in the woods. Maybe I could see what was really happening out here. But as I reached for the door again, the air shifted. I stopped, mid-motion, feeling it. Something had changed. A heavy, oppressive presence settled over me, like the forest itself was watching, waiting. The trees seemed closer now, their twisted limbs pressing against the walls of the station. And then I heard it. A soft tapping. It wasn't at the door anymore. It wasn't even at the window. It was coming from inside the station. The tapping was rhythmic, deliberate, like fingers drumming against the wood, just out of sight. I spun around, the flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Nothing. The room was empty, save for the worn furniture and the faint outlines of objects in the dim light. But the tapping continued, growing louder, moving closer. I felt my breath catch in my throat as the sound grew more distinct. It was coming from behind the shelves from the far corner of the room where the supplies were stored. My feet seemed to move of their own accord, creeping slowly toward the noise, my body tense with fear, every instinct warning me to stop, to turn back. But I couldn't. I had to know. I rounded the corner, the beam of my flashlight trembling in my hand. The shelves were cluttered with old maps, tools, and gear. Nothing out of the ordinary. The tapping had stopped, but something else lingered in the air, an unmistakable presence. My eyes fell on a small, dusty box on the floor, tucked away behind a pile of unused equipment. It hadn't been there before. I was sure of it. I knelt down, my fingers trembling as I reached for it, and as soon as my hand touched the surface, the temperature in the room dropped. I could see my breath, a mist forming in front of me. With a quick motion, I pried open the box. Inside was a bundle of old, yellowed paper, tied together with twine. I pulled it free and unwrapped it carefully, revealing a collection of handwritten notes, a journal of some kind. The pages were worn, the ink faded, but the words were still legible. The rules are not just rules. They are the boundaries of a world you do not understand. The forest waits for the weak to stray from the path. It is alive, watching. You must never let it know you are aware. If it knows, you are lost. The words sent a chill down my spine. I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I had the sinking feeling that I was about to find out. And just as I thought I had a grasp on what was happening, a voice came from the dark corner of the room, barely above a whisper. "James, I spun around, but there was no one there. It was getting harder to breathe. The forest was closing in on me, and I had no idea how to escape. The moment I heard my name whispered from the shadows, I nearly collapsed. My heart hammered in my chest as if it had forgotten how to beat. The air felt thick, oppressive, like the forest outside had reached into the station, suffocating me with its presence. I turned, flashlight trembling in my grip, scanning every corner of the room. There was nothing. Just the bare walls, the shelves stacked with supplies, the open door leading into the dark night beyond. James. The voice was soft, almost gentle, but it was unmistakable. It came from just beyond the doorway. I swallowed hard. The temperature in the room had dropped even further. I could see my breath now, the mist swirling in front of me as though the room itself had become a fog. My hands shook so violently, I almost dropped the flashlight. Without thinking, I backed toward the door, my feet dragging across the wooden floor. I was already halfway to the door when I heard it again. James. This time it was closer, much closer. I snapped around, the beam of my flashlight dancing wildly across the room. Still nothing. My pulse quickened, fear setting in as I realized something. The voice was inside my head now. It wasn't a sound from the outside. It was in my bones, a whisper carried directly into my mind. I couldn't move. The weight of the forest outside pressed in on me. Every tree and shadow felt alive, watching me. The warning was clear now. The forest doesn't like it when you're awake when they're sleeping. I glanced at the small journal in my hands, the one I'd found hidden behind the shelves. The rules, the warnings they'd etched in ink, seemed more real now than ever before. The journal had said the forest was alive. I could feel it. It was right outside, waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to slip just once. The door behind me creaked open. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to see what was waiting for me in the darkness. But my body moved against my will, turning toward the door, my feet dragging me into the unknown. The night outside the station was thick, the air heavy with the smell of damp earth and rotting wood. The trees loomed, their shadows long and distorted, stretching across the ground like dark fingers. I could hear the wind now, a faint howl that seemed to be coming from everywhere. But there was something else in the air, something that felt wrong, a rustling. I turned around, thinking I'd caught a glimpse of something moving in the trees. But no, it wasn't in the woods at all. It was behind me, in the corner of the station. The darkness there seemed deeper now, thicker than it had been before. A shape materialized, flickering in and out of existence like a wisp of smoke. I stepped back, the floor creaking under my feet. The shape was not human. It was tall, hunched, with limbs too long and twisted, its silhouette barely visible in the dim light of the station. But what struck me the most was the absence. Where its face should have been, there was only darkness. I couldn't move. It reached out toward me with one long, bony finger, and I could feel the air grow colder as it did. The shape didn't speak, but somehow I knew it was waiting for me to do something. I had heard the warnings in the journal. The things that lurked in the shadows were never truly human. But I couldn't tear my eyes away from it. There was something so captivating about it, something hypnotic that drew me in. The longer I looked at it, the more I felt as if my thoughts were slipping away, like I was being pulled into some dark abyss. I shook my head, trying to focus, to force my legs to move, but it was as if I was rooted to the spot. My body wouldn't obey. It whispered, "You're not supposed to be here." The voice was hollow, distant, like it was coming from inside my skull. It didn't belong to the shape. It was the voice of the forest itself, a sound as old as the trees. I staggered back, my heart thudding painfully in my chest. I turned on my heel, my flashlight beam flicking over the walls, the windows, anything but that thing in the corner. But I couldn't escape it. My legs were moving again, but they were leading me toward the door, toward the place I feared most, the dark woods outside. I stumbled across the porch, breathing hard, the journal still clutched tightly in my hands. It wasn't real, I told myself. None of it was real. The warnings in the journal, the strange shapes, the whispers, they had to be tricks of the mind, products of my fear, of the isolation. I had to get a grip. But as I reached for the door, I saw something I had missed before. The fire tower. I could see its skeletal form rising above the trees in the distance. Carter had said to patrol it every night, to check the light at exactly 2:13 a.m. The thought hit me like a punch to the gut. The fire tower. I had to go there. I had to check. I turned around, looking one last time at the station, at the dark figure still hovering inside, watching me from the windows, and I ran. The path to the fire tower was dark, the trees pressing in on either side. Every step seemed to take me further away from the safety of the station, and the sounds of the forest grew louder. There were no other footsteps, no birds, no animals, just the whisper of the wind, the rustling of leaves, and the sound of my own breath. I was only a few hundred yards away when I heard it. A soft, high-pitched laugh. It came from the trees. I stopped dead in my tracks, every muscle freezing. It was distant, too far to pinpoint, but the sound sent a shiver through my spine. I hadn't been imagining it. The laugh was real. It had come from the woods, and it had been directed at me. I glanced around, my flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. The trees seemed to close in, their branches swaying in time with the wind, but they were empty. Nothing was there. Still, I could feel it. The weight of something watching me, following me, just out of sight. I continued walking, my steps quicker now, my mind racing. The fire tower was just ahead, its silhouette a dark, looming figure against the sky. The light was supposed to be on. It had to be. I reached the base of the tower, breathless, and immediately began the long climb up. The wooden steps creaked beneath my feet, the metal railing cool to the touch. Each step seemed to take longer than the last, my body protesting the effort as I ascended higher and higher into the night sky. The wind picked up as I neared the top, the trees swaying below me like an ocean of shadows. When I reached the top, I saw it. The light, it was off. A cold, heavy dread settled over me, and I realized too late that I had made a terrible mistake. The fire tower wasn't just a beacon. It was a warning. I stood there for a moment, staring at the darkness, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. The light remained off. The trees swayed gently in the wind, and yet I felt the presence again. Something out there, watching. I had to turn the light on. It was the rule. But the idea of looking out into the darkness, of exposing myself to whatever was out there, was enough to freeze me in place. But there was no choice. I had to follow the rule. I had to turn the light on. I reached for the switch. The moment my fingers touched it, the whisper came again. "James, come back." I froze, my hands still on the switch as the voice echoed through the trees, coming from all around me, filling the space like the sound of the wind. Something was out there, something I couldn't see, but it was real. It was waiting for me to make my next move. And I couldn't run anymore. I turned the light on, and the forest screamed. The instant the light flickered to life, the forest seemed to react as if it had been holding its breath, waiting for this very moment. The beam of light shot out, illuminating the trees in stark, sharp relief, casting long, grotesque shadows that stretched across the forest floor. But as I stood there at the top of the fire tower, staring down at the trees, I felt a sense of foreboding unlike anything I'd ever known. It wasn't just that the woods were dark or that they were vast, stretching out in every direction as far as the eye could see. It was something deeper, something more primal, as though the forest itself had come alive, angry at being disturbed. A low hum began to vibrate in the air, resonating through the ground beneath my feet. It wasn't the usual quiet hum of the wind, but a deeper, throbbing noise like the pulse of some ancient living creature. My pulse quickened, and I felt my breath grow shallow. My hand, still hovering over the switch, trembled. The light. I had turned it on. It was the rule. But I hadn't expected this. I took a step back, my eyes scanning the horizon. The trees appeared different now. They seemed to move, their gnarled branches twisting unnaturally, reaching toward the tower, toward me. The wind picked up, but it wasn't the usual rush of air. It was a sharp, biting gust that seemed to scrape at my skin. Something was wrong. I felt it, deep in my bones. And then I heard it. A sound, distant at first, but growing louder. A cacophony of rustling, snapping branches and soft, muffled footfalls. The sound was all around me now. Close, too close. I whipped my head around, my flashlight darting across the landscape, but there was nothing. The beam only revealed the trees swaying in the wind, their shadows shifting ominously. But the noise didn't stop. I stepped backward, my body trembling, my mind racing. The journal had warned me. The forest was alive. And now I could feel it. The trees weren't just trees. The whispers weren't just whispers. They were intentional. The forest was watching me, moving toward me as if it had a mind of its own. The hum, The vibration, it was growing stronger. The air around me seemed charged with energy, heavy with something I couldn't name. It felt as though the forest itself was alive, a single, sprawling entity. Its roots dug deep into the earth, its branches reaching for the sky. And it was angry. Angry that I had turned on the light. Angry that I was here. I turned to the tower's control panel, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the equipment, trying to make sense of it. I had to do something. The rules. The rules said to turn on the light. The rules said to keep watch, but it had never been like this before. It had never felt like this. Then there was a sound that stopped me cold. A voice. Soft at first, like a whisper on the wind. James. I froze. It was the same voice I had heard before, the one that had called my name in the station, the one that had whispered to me in the dark. The same voice, but now it wasn't coming from the direction of the station. It was coming from the trees. James, you shouldn't have done that. The words were clear now, sharp and cutting, as though they were spoken right beside my ear. I whirled around, scanning the darkness, but there was nothing. No figure, no shape, only the trees and the shifting shadows. The wind howled around me, rattling the fire tower, and the hum grew louder, more intense. My breath caught in my throat as the ground beneath my feet seemed to vibrate. I could feel it. Something was moving below me, just out of sight. It was there, waiting. I grabbed the rail, trying to steady myself, but my legs were unsteady, my mind overwhelmed by the fear that seemed to grow stronger by the second. The forest wasn't just alive. It wasn't just watching, it was hunting. Another voice, this time louder. James, come back. The words were now unmistakable, calling me from below, from the depths of the forest. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't just the trees, it wasn't just the wind. There was something down there, something alive, waiting for me to slip, to make a mistake. I had made a mistake. I had turned on the light. The light was the signal, the invitation. The forest knew. It knew I had broken the rule. And now it was coming. I felt a surge of panic rush through me, flooding my senses. My vision blurred. My hands went cold. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't. The tower was a death trap. The forest had already marked me. With shaking hands, I fumbled for my radio. I had to call for help. I had to warn Carter, warn anyone who could hear me. But as I clicked the button to transmit, there was nothing. No static, no connection, just silence. I stared at the radio, disbelief sinking in. The signal was gone. The forest had swallowed it whole. James! The voice again, louder this time, and unmistakably closer. The air seemed to shift with it, thickening with a tangible malice. I turned toward the stairs, my mind screaming at me to run, to get away, but my legs refused to move. I couldn't tear my eyes from the forest, from the shadows that were beginning to shift and writhe. I turned the flashlight off. I didn't want to see it anymore. I didn't want to know what was out there. The darkness was the only safety I had left. Come down, James. The voice was now a command, low and commanding. It didn't sound human. It sounded otherworldly, like it belonged to something ancient, something that had been waiting for this moment. I took a step backward, my heart racing. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run, but I was frozen. I couldn't tear myself away from the sight of the trees, from the shadows that now seemed to move of their own accord. And then a figure appeared. It was small at first, just a shape, a silhouette against the darkness. But as I stared, it grew, stretching upward, the shape of a human, but wrong. So wrong. Its arms were too long, its body too thin. It was pale, almost translucent, its features indistinct, as though it had no face at all. The figure raised its head toward me, and for a moment I could swear I saw something behind its eyes, something vast and hungry. It opened its mouth, but instead of sound, I felt the air grow colder, the temperature plummeting. The breath I exhaled turned to fog in front of me, and then the world around me began to blur. It was close. It was right there, standing beneath the trees, waiting for me. And then, as if on cue, the ground beneath me shifted. A loud crack echoed from below, like something massive breaking free from the earth itself. The tower groaned, the metal beams vibrating with the force of something powerful, something alive. I could feel it now, the earth itself shifting, moving, as if it were aware of my presence, as if it was part of the forest, part of whatever had been watching me all along. The forest was alive, and it was angry. The figure below began to move toward me, its long limbs twisting unnaturally as it stepped closer to the base of the tower. I backed up, my legs trembling, my heart hammering in my chest. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't face it. I turned to run, to descend the stairs, but my body was too slow. I was too slow. The creature was almost there, its dark shape looming, and I could hear its breath now, deep and slow, like a predator stalking its prey. I had to make it out of the tower. I had to escape. But the moment I turned to climb down, the ground beneath me cracked again. The forest groaned, the trees shaking violently as the air grew thick with the smell of damp earth and decay. I was trapped. And then, with a final resounding snap, the forest screamed. The scream from the forest echoed through the night like a thunderclap, shuddering the very air around me. My heart skipped a beat as the fire tower groaned beneath me, its metal frame rattling as if it too were feeling the pull of the forest below. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard, a low, guttural howl that seemed to be both animal and human, as though something ancient had just been awakened. I stumbled back, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. The creature below me was moving, its limbs stretching unnaturally as it drew closer to the tower. The trees around it twisted, their branches creaking as if they were alive, their roots breaking through the earth beneath the tower, pulling it down like a trap closing around me. I could feel it now, the weight of the forest. The air itself was thick with malice, and every inch of the ground beneath me seemed to pulse with the power of the ancient woods. The warning had been clear. The forest didn't like it when you were awake when it was sleeping, and now I had woken it. The creature below, if you could even call it that, was no longer just a silhouette in the darkness. It had begun to take shape, the form of a tall, emaciated figure with arms that were impossibly long, bending at angles that defied reason. Its face, there was no face. Just smooth, pallid skin that seemed to shift and ripple, as if it was trying to form something, but never quite succeeding. The darkness in its face seemed endless, hollow, like it was a void waiting to devour everything around it. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was watch as the creature drew closer, its movements slow and deliberate, like it was savoring the moment. It stopped just beneath the fire tower, its elongated fingers twitching, as if beckoning me to descend. But I couldn't. I couldn't move. I had to stay up here. I had to wait for help, even though I knew deep down that there was no help coming. The station was miles away, Carter was gone, and the forest was far too vast. No one was going to save me. This was my mistake, and the forest had already marked me. The hum of the forest grew louder, a stamp vibrating through my bones, and then came the whispers, hundreds of voices all at once, murmuring just beyond the edge of my hearing. They were distant but insistent, swirling around me like the wind. The voices spoke in a language I couldn't understand, a language that felt older than time itself. James, you have seen the truth now. The voice was clear, unmistakable. It was the same one that had whispered to me before, the one that had called me in the station. But now, it was no longer a whisper. It was a presence. It was inside my head, inside my thoughts, its words twisting like vines around my mind. I shook my head, trying to push the voice away. I needed to focus. I needed to think. But then another sound. A crack. A low, bone-shaking snap that made the air itself tremble. The ground beneath me groaned again, and I realized with a rising sense of terror that the tower was beginning to tilt. I looked down in horror, seeing that the trees were pushing against the base of the tower, their roots twisting upward like gnarled hands, clawing at the wood, pulling at the metal frame. The fire tower was coming down. I took a step back, my mind racing. The ground beneath me shifted again, more violently this time, and I grabbed the railing for support, feeling it shudder beneath my grip. I had to escape. I had to survive. I turned toward the stairs, but before I could take a step, a new sound filled the air, a soft, haunting wail like the cry of a child. It was coming from the trees, from deep within the woods. The sound was distorted, stretched out of shape as if it had been torn from something or someone long ago. James. The voice was different this time. It was higher, more insistent. It was pleading, and then I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, something shifted in the shadows. It was a figure, but not like the creature beneath me. This one was smaller, hunched, its body covered in tattered rags that fluttered in the wind. Its eyes were wide, hollow, black as night, and they locked onto mine with an intensity that made my stomach turn. The figure stood at the base of the tower, just beneath the creature, and it was staring directly at me. I could feel its gaze as if it were reaching into my very soul, pulling me toward it. No, I couldn't look. I had to look away. I had to keep my focus on the tower on the way out. But the eyes, those eyes were too much. James. The voice came again, and this time I felt something inside me snap. The voice, it was my own. It sounded just like me, like it was coming from the depths of my own mind. I wasn't hearing the creature anymore. I was hearing the forest, hearing it speak in the language of the lost, the forgotten, the ones who had been consumed by the woods before me. I stumbled back, the breath caught in my throat. What had happened to them? What had happened to Carter? James. I couldn't take it. I'm a park ranger at the Ozarks in Missouri. There are strange rules to follow. Part 6, The Hollow Eyes. The scream from the forest echoed through the night like a thunderclap, shuddering the very air around me. My heart skipped a beat as the fire tower groaned beneath me, its metal frame rattling as if it too were feeling the pull of the forest below. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard. James. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and ran. My feet hit the stairs with a deafening thud as I scrambled down, my hands gripping the railing, my body jerking with each step. The tower shook beneath me, groaning as the force of the forest below tried to pull it down. But I couldn't stop. I had to make it out. I had to escape. My feet slid on the wet wood as I descended, and I had to catch myself twice before I tumbled down. The steps were shaking now, creaking under the pressure of the roots pushing against the base of the tower. I was only halfway down when I felt a shudder ripple through the structure. The tower was collapsing. The roots were breaking through, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. James? I was almost at the bottom when I heard the voice again. It wasn't coming from the creature anymore. It was coming from behind me, from the stairs themselves. It was everywhere. The forest had claimed me. It was inside my head. I couldn't escape it. I hit the ground with a jarring thud, my knees buckling beneath me. I managed to push myself up, barely able to keep my balance as I sprinted toward the trees. The forest was alive. It was everywhere. The whispers were louder now, a chorus of voices all clamoring for my attention. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, and the darkness seemed to close in on me. I ran faster, my legs burning with the effort. The light from the fire tower flickered behind me, casting long, warped shadows that seemed to follow me as I ran. I couldn't stop. I couldn't slow down. But then I heard it. A snap, a crack, and then the sound of something moving quickly, something that was closing in on me from behind. I turned to look, my breath caught in my throat. The figure was there again, standing at the edge of the trees, its hollow eyes gleaming in the darkness. It was no longer alone. Figures were emerging from the shadows, their eyes all hollow, their bodies twisted, reaching for me. I could feel them. The forest was closing in. The ground was shaking beneath me, the trees themselves moving into the abyss. I ran, my feet pounding against the soft earth of the Ozarks, but it felt like the forest was swallowing me whole with every step I took. The figures behind me, those twisted, hollow-eyed creatures, were getting closer, their limbs stretching unnaturally, as if they were moving through thick mud, but relentless and unyielding in their pursuit. I could hear their breath now, slow and deep, filling the air like smoke, suffocating everything around me. I didn't dare look back again. If I did, I feared I would see something that would end me in a single glance. The woods had changed. It was no longer just a place of trees and wildlife, a peaceful expanse of nature that I had sworn to protect. The darkness of the forest was different now, thick with something ancient, something that belonged to another world, an alien force that bent the rules of reality itself. The trees loomed over me like towering sentinels, their gnarled branches stretching to form a canopy that blotted out the moon, plunging everything into an oppressive blackness. The air was stifling, heavy, with an unnatural humidity that clung to my skin, suffocating my every breath. My clothes were soaked with sweat, my chest heaving as I pushed forward, each step taking more out of me than the last. My mind raced in terror, a storm of thoughts spinning through my head, each one more frantic than the last. Where was I going? How could I escape this? What were those things? The whispers, the voices in my head were growing louder with each passing moment, like an avalanche of sound crashing over me, burying me in a blizzard of half-formed words. James, you can't run. James, you've broken the rule. James, it's too late. I stumbled, my foot catching on a tree root that seemed to rise out of the earth with malicious intent. My knees hit the ground hard, the impact rattling my bones. For a moment I lay there, gasping for air, feeling the weight of the forest pressing down on me, threatening to crush me beneath it. And then I heard it. The low, bone-chilling hum again. It was no longer distant, no longer a faint vibration in the ground. It was here, vibrating in my chest, shaking the air around me, pulsating like a heartbeat. It was the forest itself, alive and aware. It was watching me, feeling me, waiting for me to fall. I scrambled to my feet, but the darkness was closing in. The ground was alive now, the roots shifting and stretching, twisting beneath my feet like serpents. I could feel them tugging at me, trying to drag me down, pulling me into the earth where I would be swallowed whole. James. The voice was no longer a whisper. It was a growl now, deep and guttural, coming from all around me, as if the very trees were speaking. I whipped my head around, frantic, my breath coming in shallow gasps. I couldn't see anything, just the endless, suffocating dark. The creatures were there, I knew they were. They were closing in on me, their hollow eyes burning into my skin, their long, twisted limbs reaching for me, grabbing at the air as though it were made of solid matter. I had to keep moving. I had to run. I stumbled forward again, my legs like lead, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. The ground felt unstable beneath me, as though the earth itself were shifting, rearranging itself to trap me. The wind picked up, howling through the trees like a banshee, rattling the branches above me, pushing the darkness even deeper into my mind. But there was something else, something worse. The hum had intensified. The noise wasn't just vibrating in the air anymore, it was inside me. My head was pounding, my pulse roaring in my ears. The forest was no longer just a place, it was a living, breathing entity, and I was its prey. I knew the rules. I had read the journal, I had heard the stories from the old rangers, from the locals who warned me about the cursed woods, but I had never truly understood. Now, I did. The light. The forest didn't just want you to follow the rules, it demanded them. And I had broken them. I had awakened something that should have stayed asleep. I kept running, my feet barely finding purchase on the uneven ground, my mind blank with terror. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know if there was any way out of this, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't face what I had unleashed. I reached a clearing, a small patch of open space where the trees didn't seem as thick. The moon, a thin crescent, barely lit the edges of the clearing, casting everything in an eerie silver glow. For a moment, I thought I had escaped, thought maybe I had outrun them. But the silence in the clearing was deafening. It was wrong. The air didn't feel right. It was too still. And then I saw it, a figure standing just at the edge of the clearing. It was small, too small, and hunched like something malformed, its face hidden in shadow. Its limbs were too long, its movements too fluid, like it was gliding instead of walking. I froze, my body locked in place, my heart hammering against my ribs. The figure's head turned slowly toward me, and I could feel its eyes, those hollow, empty eyes, piercing through the dark, locking onto me like they had a claim on my very soul. You shouldn't have come here. The voice was a rasp, a sound like dry leaves scraping together. It wasn't the voice from before. It was something else, something deeper, something older. The words crawled into my mind, sinking their claws into my thoughts. The figure stepped forward, its limbs extending, stretching impossibly long as it drew nearer. My heart raced faster, my body trembling with dread. I tried to back away, but my legs were frozen, my body rooted to the spot as though the very earth had claimed me. I had made a mistake. I had broken the rule. And now there was no escape. The figure's face came into the light, and I saw it. It wasn't a face at all. It was a void, blackness swirling and endless. I couldn't look away. The emptiness in its face drew me in, pulling me deeper into the darkness. The ground beneath me seemed to disappear, and I felt myself falling, sinking into that void. The forest was a part of it now. Everything was. The air was thick with it, suffocating me, drowning me in its weight. I opened my mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The creature's hollow eyes bore into mine, and all I could see was that darkness. Nothing but emptiness, nothing but the forest. It was the same darkness that had consumed Carter, like the same darkness that had taken the others. And now it was taking me. The forest had claimed me, and there was no going back. Time had ceased to exist in that moment, and yet the horrors of it stretched on, an eternal nightmare that had no end. My body felt like it was suspended in some terrible otherworldly place where nothing made sense, and yet everything felt terrifyingly real. The darkness in front of me, the emptiness that had consumed the figure's face, was pulling me closer. I could feel the very fabric of my being unraveling, as if I was being pulled apart piece by piece and woven into something else, something that didn't belong in the world of the living. I couldn't look away from the void. There was nothing there, no features, no eyes, no face to anchor me to reality. It was like staring into the infinite abyss, and the abyss was staring back at me. Every time I tried to blink, to move, to break free, I was drawn deeper. The more I fought, the tighter the grip of the forest became, the more the trees seemed to close in on me, their branches clawing at the air around me as though they, too, were hungry. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat, stifled by the pressure of the void. The words of the voices, the whispers, were becoming overwhelming. It was a cacophony of half-formed sentences, fragments of forgotten souls that had lost their place in the world. Each whisper echoed in my mind, and I knew deep down they were the voices of those who had come before me. Rangers, wanderers, the curious, the ones who had been too foolish, too careless to heed the warnings. You shouldn't have broken the rule. The voice wasn't my own this time. It wasn't the hollow whisper of the forest. No, this voice was deeper. It was cold, malevolent. It resonated through my bones, vibrating in every part of me. And then I saw it. The figure was no longer just standing at the edge of the clearing. It was moving toward me, gliding effortlessly through the air, its limbs elongating like a shadow stretching across the earth. It reached out with a single gnarled finger, its touch brushing against my cheek like a cold wind. "Do you know what you've done?" Its voice was like the sound of gravel being ground underfoot, rough and unforgiving. I tried to move, to pull away, but my body refused to obey. I was trapped, unable to escape. I closed my eyes, desperate to escape the suffocating pressure of the darkness, but even in the darkness, I felt the weight of its eyes on me. I felt its presence more than I saw it. It was everywhere. I could feel it in my skin, in my chest, in the very air around me. The forest was alive, and it was aware. It was watching me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to beg for mercy. But I knew deep down there was no mercy to be had here. There was no forgiveness, no escape from the weight of the ancient rules I had broken. The forest had claimed me, and now it was extracting its price. The figure leaned closer, its face, or rather the empty void that served as its face, barely inches from mine. I could feel its cold, suffocating presence. It was no longer an entity that existed outside of me. It was a part of me now. My heartbeat quickened, and with it the pressure grew. I couldn't breathe. My lungs burned as though the very air had been drained from them. The whispers in my mind grew louder, becoming more distinct. They were speaking directly to me now. "James, you broke the rule. You didn't listen." The weight of their words crushed me, each syllable heavy with meaning, with consequence. I understood now. I understood what I had done, what I had unleashed. The forest had rules, rules that were ancient and sacred, rules that governed its very existence, that kept its malevolent spirit contained. And I had ignored them. I had violated them. I had come to this place, to this station, and I had unwittingly awakened something that should have remained asleep. The forest had waited for this moment, and now that it had me, it was going to ensure that I understood the true cost of my ignorance. The ground beneath my feet trembled as if in response to the figure's presence. The trees around me groaned, their roots shifting in the earth, reaching up like skeletal hands. The forest was alive in a way that went beyond anything I could comprehend. It was sentient, it was hungry, and it knew me. It was inside me now. I could feel it, coursing through my veins, suffusing my thoughts. It wasn't just the trees or the creatures that I had seen. It wasn't just the twisted figures that haunted my nightmares. It was the very essence of the forest, the soul of the Ozarks, the ancient force that had existed long before humanity had even come into being, and it had been waiting for me to awaken it. The figure raised its hand, and I felt the world shift again, the space around me warping and twisting. I could hear the trees, their branches bending as they reached for me, their whispers now a cacophony that drowned out everything else. There is no going back now. The words felt like a physical blow, knocking the wind out of me. I gasped, trying to steady myself, but the pressure was unbearable. I couldn't escape. I couldn't move. The figure's voice rumbled again, more forceful now, as if the earth itself had given its strength. You will never leave this place, James. You will never leave the forest. You've broken the rule, and now you will pay the price. I wanted to fight. I wanted to resist, but the words hit me like a tidal wave, drowning out my will, my strength. There was nothing I could do but listen. The ground beneath me quaked again, more violently this time, and I felt myself being pulled forward, into the void. The figure's face loomed closer, and I could see it now, see the endless blackness that had consumed it. I could see the emptiness, the place where the forest had stored all of its lost souls, the ones who had been taken, consumed, erased by its hunger. I felt myself slipping, falling into the abyss. The trees closed in, the shadows swallowed me whole. The figure's cold, hollow eyes were the last thing I saw before the darkness consumed everything. And then I was gone. The darkness had no end. It wasn't a void I could escape, nor a place I could comprehend. It was something beyond my understanding, stretching endlessly, deeper than any nightmare I'd ever had. I had thought I was gone, consumed by the very thing I had violated. But no, the forest wasn't finished with me yet. I hadn't been claimed in the way I feared. Instead, I had become part of something much worse. My body felt as though it was floating, weightless, suspended in the abyss. But it wasn't truly still. I could feel the vibrations. Something was shifting beneath me, something alive and vast. The very air, if you could call it air, was thick and oppressive, like it was pressing against my skin, making it harder to breathe. My mind was trapped in a haze, too exhausted, too afraid to think clearly. Yet through the fog of terror, I could feel a pull, a presence that beckoned me. The whispers returned. This time, they weren't distant. They were inside me, scratching at the edges of my thoughts, fighting for my attention. The voices were no longer just random fragments of forgotten souls. They were clear now, terrifyingly clear. You can't escape. You are part of it now. The forest owns you. I tried to close my mind to them, but they didn't relent. They pushed in deeper, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. The world around me seemed to twist and bend, like the very fabric of reality was being torn apart, stitch by stitch. Suddenly there was light. It was faint at first, a flicker in the distance, but it grew brighter, spreading out like the first rays of dawn creeping through a dense fog. The light felt wrong. It wasn't the warm, welcoming glow of the sun. It was cold, harsh, like the light of something unnatural. I couldn't tell where it was coming from, but it was there, and it was pulling me toward it. I tried to fight it, to resist the urge to move toward it, but I couldn't. Something inside me, something primal, told me that I had to go toward the light, that there was no other way. My body moved on its own, my feet dragging against the unseen floor beneath me, the whispers growing louder as I stumbled forward. And then I saw it. The clearing. It was the same clearing from before, the one with the twisted trees, the one where I had seen the figure with the void for a face. But it was different now. The trees, once gnarled and threatening, were standing still as if they had been petrified. The air was thick with the same oppressive atmosphere. But there was a stillness that I hadn't noticed before. It was as though time itself had frozen here, and I was the only thing moving. And then I saw them. The figures. The creatures. They were standing at the edge of the clearing, but they weren't moving anymore. They were waiting, watching. Their eyes, those endless, hollow eyes, were fixed on me, unblinking, unfeeling. Their presence was suffocating, and I could feel their hunger, their desire to claim me, to make me one of them. James! It was the same voice as before, but this time it was more than just a whisper. It was a command. I could hear it in my bones. I could feel it in my heart. The forest was calling to me. It was claiming me, and I had no choice but to listen. I tried to move, tried to escape, but my body betrayed me. It was as though the earth itself was pulling me back, anchoring me to the spot. The ground beneath me seemed to tremble, vibrating with the force of the forest's will. It was as though the land itself had taken root inside of me, growing through my veins, feeding off my fear. The figure, the one with the hollow face, stepped forward, its form shifting and twisting as it neared me. Its presence felt like a cold wind blowing through me, leaving a trail of ice where it touched. It was closer now, and I could feel the void in its face, sucking everything into it. "You've broken the rule, James." Its voice was deep, resonating in my chest, in my skull. It was both an accusation and a declaration, the truth. The forest had waited, it had watched, and now I had finally understood the cost of my ignorance. I opened my mouth to speak, to beg for forgiveness, but no sound came. I could feel the weight of the forest closing in on me. The trees were no longer just trees. They were part of the void. The ground beneath me was no longer solid. It was the same endless abyss that had swallowed me before. The forest claims what it is owed. The figure raised a hand, and the trees around me began to shift, their branches bending toward me like gnarled fingers. The air became colder, the darkness deeper, as the creature reached out with its long, skeletal hand. I could feel its touch before it even made contact. It was like the very air around me turned to ice, the pressure squeezing my chest, making it impossible to breathe. I was paralyzed. My limbs wouldn't move. My eyes were locked onto the creature, unable to look away. I could feel it inside me, inside my mind, inside my body. The forest had already taken me. It was already pulling me under. And then something snapped. The world around me collapsed into itself, the trees bending, the ground crumbling. The creatures, the whispers, the figure, they all melted into the dark like shadows fading into the night. The light that had drawn me here flickered and died. It was as though the entire clearing had never existed. I was falling into the abyss deeper and deeper, until I could no longer tell up from down, left from right. The air was thick and heavy, pressing against me like 1,000 invisible hands. The whispers were no longer whispers, they were screams. Screams of the lost souls that had come before me, their voices rising together in a chorus of agony. I tried to scream, to fight back, but there was nothing left. I was slipping into the dark, into the forest's endless hunger. And as I fell, I understood. The forest didn't just claim your body, it claimed your soul. It swallowed you whole until you became part of it. Forever. And then there was nothing. The screams, the voices, the forest, all of it vanished. I was lost. When I woke, I wasn't sure where I was. There was no light, no comforting sense of familiarity. There was only darkness, an all-consuming blackness that stretched far beyond the edges of my consciousness, deeper than the void I had once fallen into. But I could feel something now. Something in my bones, in my very being. The forest was there, waiting, watching. And it wasn't just an observer anymore. It had become me. I could feel it in the weight of the air, in the rhythmic pulse of the ground beneath me. It had taken me, as it had taken so many others before me. I couldn't remember how long I'd been lost in that darkness. It could have been hours, days, or longer. Time had stopped meaning anything. I couldn't hear the whispers anymore, but I could feel them, buried deep in the recesses of my mind, like a memory I couldn't shake. I could feel the hunger, the insatiable desire that had driven the forest to consume me. The whispers had become a part of me. The forest had claimed me, and I had no choice but to exist as part of it. I tried to move, to get up, but my body was heavier than it should have been. It felt like it had been made of stone, like the forest itself had rooted me into the earth, bound me with invisible threads. My limbs shook as I forced myself to sit up, my chest tight as I struggled to breathe. The air was thick and oppressive, and the taste of dirt, of decay, filled my mouth. And then I felt it, a presence. The same presence that had been stalking me from the moment I had stepped foot into the Ozarks. The same presence that had been watching me, waiting for me to break. It was here. It was inside me now. I could sense it like a shadow moving just beyond my reach. It was the forest, but it was more than that. It was the very soul of the Ozarks, its ancient power, its hunger, and it was waiting for me to understand. The ground shifted beneath me, a low rumble that felt like it was coming from deep within the earth itself. The trees, no, they weren't trees anymore. They were sentient beings, their roots alive with the pulse of the forest. Their branches reached toward me, stretching out like fingers, as if beckoning me to join them in the endless dark. "You've broken the rule, James." The voice wasn't a whisper this time. It wasn't an echo of the past. It was clear, solid, and real. It came from everywhere and nowhere all at once. The words were not spoken, they were the forest. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I wanted to scream, to ask what was happening, to beg for answers, but I couldn't. I could barely think. The very essence of the forest was inside me now. Its knowledge, its will, suffocating me. The figure with the hollow eyes, the twisted creature that had haunted me, was me now. It was what I had become. You are part of the forest, James. The voice rumbled through the ground, vibrating my bones. I couldn't understand what was happening. I couldn't understand what I had become. I stood shakily, my legs still unsteady as I looked around. But it was not a clearing I found myself in. The trees, no, the beings surrounded me, their branches interwoven, their bark shifting like living skin. The world around me was in motion, bending and twisting, as if reality itself was being reshaped, remade. There was no more sky, there was no horizon. The forest was the world now. The forest was me. There are rules, the voice continued, its tone like a low hum. Rules that govern this place. You broke them, and now you will pay the price. The words made no sense. I had heard them before, in the journal, in the whispers, in the warnings of the old rangers, but now they were too real. They were a truth that had no escape. And the cost was more than I could comprehend. The figure with the hollow eyes appeared before me again, its form shifting in the mist. Its limbs were longer now, impossibly stretched, as if it had transcended the physical realm altogether. Its face, its hollow, empty face, was a reflection of the forest itself. The darkness, the hunger, the void. You are one of us now, James. I tried to speak, to shout, to protest, but nothing came. My throat was dry, tight, like it had been sealed shut. I wanted to fight, to escape, but my body was no longer my own. I felt my soul, my very identity, slipping away, merging with the forest. You will never leave. The forest has you now. I was no longer sure if I was hearing the voice or if it was my own thoughts speaking. But the truth, the horrifying, undeniable truth, was clear. The forest didn't just consume the body. It consumed the soul. The moment you stepped into its domain, you became part of it. There was no leaving. There was no going back. The hunger, the insatiable, eternal hunger, was what I had become. The forest, the very earth beneath my feet, was now part of me. I was part of it. I closed my eyes not in fear, but in acceptance. I understood now. The rules, the warnings, they weren't just for me. They were for everyone who dared to step into this place. The Ozarks were alive. They were ancient. And they demanded respect. There was no escape. There was no redemption, and now there would never be another ranger at this station. I was the forest, and it was me.